Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to review the Pro X Superlight 2. Today, this is what we're going to cover. What's in the box, specs, audio click test, Superlight 2 versus Superlight versus G Pro, pros and cons, overall cost. Now, disclaimer, I am a Logitech G fan, and this was sent to me by Logitech, so shout out to them for sending this over to me. But I always have my own opinion, and prior have always been critical in certain areas, so please take that with a grain of salt. I am not a reviewer, I am a gamer who has utilized these mouse for thousands of hours and hopefully can give you a fair assessment of whether or not you should get this mouse. Lastly, I've never been a fan of the software side of the mice, so I'm not going to do a whole lot of review of it. I always prefer just the cleanest plug in and play and not have to deal with software. That's just my own opinion. For my fastest thoughts, in case you don't want to watch the full review, here are some bullet points. I love the mouse, bluntly. It has been improved and refined, so overall greater precision across the board. So solid shout out to Logitech G for improving on the formula. If you don't like the Superlight or the G Pro, this is definitely not going to be the mouse for you. The changes in the current Superlight 2, unless you're a pro player or playing at the highest level, you may honestly not see much of a difference. It's like going from 240 Hz to 360. But I guess that's why they call it the Pro series, so it does make sense. Alright, let's segue over to the unboxing. Alright, now in this portion what we're going to review is what really came in the box. The box itself is pretty self-explanatory with the Pro X Superlight 2. Now, what really came in the box is pretty easy because Logitech doesn't really put a whole lot in their box. I mean, we have the mouse itself, we have the wireless dongle. Now, the dongle itself is actually, you're going to hear me unplug it for just a second here. There's the unplug. Now, you'll notice that the dongle comes together here. It's a little bit larger than the prior ones. A little bit different there. The mouse itself, which we're going to be showcasing and talking a whole lot about and getting into. I removed this little panel here, just as an FYI. That did come with a little panel. I just tend to remove it just because I like the way it feels without it. I've done that with all my G Pros that I have, even like the old one. This is an old one that I custom painted. And this is my other Superlight. I don't know why I prefer removing the ones at the bottom, but I just do. That's my own personal preference. I know you can kind of change those. Now let's talk about as well what was else in the box. That you do have the cable here, but it's not braided. The cable itself is not braided. It's just a standard cable, USB-C. Have that there. Comes with a little booklet here with a bunch of stuff inside. Let's take a look. Oh, interesting. You know, I am glad I opened this up because I didn't even use this panel here. The other one doesn't have the ETFE at the bottom. Let's snap that in there. I think it really snaps in. I think I've got it on the wrong size right now. It's not going in. There we go. Got to make sure it's on the right side so the magnets really hit. So I guess that changes the glide. I don't know, I've always really enjoyed the glide without it. Just a little bit less resistance. It's very personal preference. Okay, that's very, very personal preference. It doesn't, I guess with more resistance, you can definitely feel the impact and the difference on the mice feet. For better, for worse. I guess it can give you more control, kind of slow things down. I definitely prefer without it. Now that is just everyone's own personal preference. Let's see what else came in here. You have some grip tape. I remember the last time I tried the grip tape, it definitely wore off pretty quick. The only downside of grip tape, and I've never experienced, this isn't against Logitech G, but any sort of grip tape has never been good for me because it just tends to wear off very, very quickly. And that's because I have very sweaty hands, and I guess it's just unfortunate. Came with a little booklet here. Guess it's pretty straightforward, you know, what you have inside of the booklet and where you plug it in. You can use the other dongles, just as an FYI, anything that connects with these dongles in terms of USB-C. So if you have other stuff, it is cross-compatible. Let's say I did a review on the Zowie mouse, all that stuff works all the same, don't even have to worry about it. That's pretty much everything that is in the box, so pretty straightforward. And what I want to talk about now next is really breaking down the specs, and then we're going to discuss everything else when it comes to this mouse. So let's segue to that. Now, let's talk about the specs of this mouse. The biggest thing is that they're boasting a 2K polling rate compared to the 1000 polling rate. Now, everyone will break that down further in comparing 500 versus 1000 versus 2000. Now, when we talk about the polling rate, it's very interesting where it can feel like placebo, but pretty much what polling rate is that it's updating 2000 times within a second, which means that you're getting a more responsive feel from the mouse. Now, you might be asking the question, did I notice a difference from this feel. It could be placebo, like I said. I would say yes, especially from all the aim training I've done, but for maybe the average person, which is probably why this is the Pro series itself, then you may not notice as much of a difference. Now I noticed also whenever I plugged this in, I was around 50% battery, and the downside of it is it died almost instantaneously. But since I charged it, it's supposed to last about 95 hours. I have yet to charge it. If you were in my last stream where I played for 4 hours straight, I think I only lost about 5 to 7% battery life, which isn't bad. So I guess the 95-hour battery life seems to come to play. Now, speaking of play, Power Play is compatible with this mouse. If you're interested in Power Play, I have yet to ever use it because I use different mouse pads, and the one you're seeing here is a SkyPad, so that's what I did all my testing on. Another thing is it has Light Force hybrid switches, meaning it has optical switches. These are different. These feel very different compared to the standard Pro mouse that we've used before. And we're going to do a comparison between these two, don't worry. This is a Superlight, this is Superlight 2, and then I have this one here, which is just a regular G Pro mouse. Now, another thing, this is about 60 grams, so it is lighter than your Superlight by 3 grams. Not sure, I think that's more of a balance thing that they were trying to achieve, and we're going to talk about the placement of the mice feet, but I'm going to do that in the comparison portion because we need to take a look at that because there is a little bit of difference there. The biggest thing that has been improved, I think that because this isn't a new mouse, this is a improvement for precision, for aim, to heighten the overall performance of what worked for the Superlight in general, and that's why we have the Superlight 2 here with us. So that's pretty much all of the nitty-gritty specs, but we need to segment this out and talk about each of these in their own right. So let's go into the section where we discuss comparing at least the Superlight versus the Superlight 2. So now, what we have here on the left is the Superlight 2, and this is the Superlight. By the way, the Superlight 2 comes in white, black, and pink. So you'll have the pink one here, and if you prefer that, you can definitely purchase that. Now, what's interesting, and this is why I saved it for this portion, you'll notice the mice feet are a little different on the bottom. They kind of loop a bit more here, and they're a little bit more spread out going over to the left and right here, which is interesting. I didn't think that would make such a difference, but it kind of does when you're using, which is why I mentioned when we talk about 1000 polling versus 2000 is it the mice feet that's making the big difference in placement, or is it the sensor itself? I think it's the sensor, just my own personal preference or opinion on that. I think it's the sensor and the polling rate that is making that difference, but you have a little bit more control if you prefer it. But at least you get the ability to kind of customize. And these things, if you have the other one here for the Superlight, these fit, by the way. Let's say you want to just put that over there on that one. They are cross-compatible there, so there is at least, you know, hey, if you have, maybe you already beaten these in, and you prefer to have beaten in mouse skates, which is definitely a preference. It took me about 2 to 3 hours to beat in these skates, because they were a little bit more rigid, and so after about 2 hours, and it finally got into its glide. So if you're playing with this outside of the box, you're gonna have to wait at least 2 hours to kind of really break it in, especially if you're using a SkyPad. And then it felt a lot more. I was like, okay, there it is. That's the performance I'm looking for. I think just the way it's cut, and that's always been very general in any mice to kind of give a breaking in feel. And then once they're broken in, then it really has its overall glide. Now let's talk about each of them all together in terms of weight. And we'll go from, I guess, lightest on the left side to heaviest. We talk about each of these mice. So when you're having somebody review this, I can honestly tell you that you're talking with somebody who has utilized all of these mice very extensively. This has always been my go-to. I know I gave the disclaimer at the start, but I'm confident I can give you a very strong review on this mice because I've used a lot. So the Superlight on the far left, the 2 here, is at 60 grams. Now, the biggest thing that we didn't talk about is the scroll wheel and also the switches, but I'm going to do an audio test for you guys in just a minute because that comparison is very different. I want you to hear it. The scroll wheel here is, you can't almost, I'm not going to be able to even record it because you can't even hear it. Now, if I use these, it almost has more of a tug and you can really feel it. This one also, these two are very similar in that regard. This one is wildly different. I don't think you can even hear the scroll wheel. It just feels a lot more fluid in general. The switches are very different from each mouse, to be honest. I think probably because of G Pro, I've already old one. I've already worked it in. This one has probably like the lightest feather. So the optical switches here are better for precision. They're definitely louder, but I think that we're going to run into an issue where you can't click as fast because it takes a second to actually click down. When I show you the audio test, you're going to notice that big difference on those switches. I would say that the Superlight feels squishier, helping you go for more rapid fire. So I guess if you're more of a Minecraft player, I know that rapid fire clicking is kind of important, but I think that the G Pro, the heavier one on the far right, makes a big difference. And you notice all the mice feet difference here, because I mean these are all in their own regard pretty expensive mice, you know, and you see them all on the bottom there. Boom. It's like an evolution of Pokemon, essentially. And I mean, the colors themselves also lean into being a Pokemon, right? We got the one, again, on the far left here, which is the Superlight 2. And we have the regular Superlight. And then we have just the standard G Pro. Now, what's interesting is how much more resistance there is on this one, even though there's less contact on the mice feet, but the weight does make a difference. So even though we're only talking about 3 grams, it does feel impactful, especially with the polling rate. Because remember, I put out a video a long time ago talking about 500 polling rate to 1,000, and where a 1,000 polling rate can feel a bit more floaty and alive. It feels more responsive. That's always the feeling I get. If you go down to a 500 polling rate, it can feel a little more, I guess, rigid. And it's not a bad feeling. Give it a shot yourself. Set your mice to 500 and then adjust to 1,000. You'll know what I'm talking about, where you have this more alive feeling. But that's the only way I can explain it, even though it's updating, you know, less frequently, and there is a difference there, which is fascinating in itself. I think that's the only way I've been able to describe it. That if you may have shaky hands, sometimes something that's a bit more responsive may not be as good, and maybe a lower polling rate that updates a little less frequently, so it's not just getting every single like movement. I mean, I tend to have shaky hands myself at times. Like you probably noticed in the review, sometimes my hands will shake a little bit. That happens whenever I don't eat and so forth, pretty dramatically, but nonetheless, that's why I'm just trying to give an example that'll help you guys out. Now we got all that out of the way. Let's talk about some of the pros, and let's segue over to an audio difference. And I want to give you the audio difference of each of these. You're going to hear the Superlight 2, you're going to hear the regular Superlight, and then you're going to hear the G Pro. And I'm going to let you make your own decision on what kind of switches that you prefer and what works for you and what doesn't. And we'll kind of go from there. Overall, I had to say I really enjoy the improvement of this mouse across the board. I think that everything has been refined, improved, and if you're a big fan of the Superlight, then I promise you that you're going to be a big fan of this mouse. It comes in at a cost of $159.99, which is expensive, but that is kind of standard. I mean, when I looked at my Zowie mouse, it was around $150. The other Superlight was around $150. At this point, this is kind of the industry standard for cost, and I mean, the shape is undeniable. It's not like you see the shape here has changed in any way, really, shape or form, no pun intended. But some of the switches and just refinement of the product has really come a long way. You know that I used a G303 before, and I started going back to the Superlight, and now that I have the Superlight 2, this is my new daily driver. This is my new mouse. This is what I love to use, and I would say the cons of it is it's a pretty steep cost to kind of get into, to be honest, no matter which way you want to spin it. It is a very durable mouse. It lasts a really long time. The sensor is top of the market. I can't think of too many cons besides if you're looking for more of a mouse that favors the shape that you're looking for. Then this, if you hate the G Pro series mouse and how they feel and their shape, and you don't want something that's super small, this isn't the mouse for you, unfortunately. If you're looking for something that is more ergonomic, I mean, it feels great and it's fantastic. It works for all hand shapes. When we talk about the shapes, like I use a weird grip style like this, you can definitely claw it. You can palm it, and you can use fingertip grip. And it's flexible for all that, which is why it's always been very popular among pros, because you have everything at your disposal here. Now, for cons, I'm trying to think of what I don't like about it, but I'm just somebody who's always been a fan of this type of mouse, and so take this review, if you will, with as much of a grain of salt as humanly possible, with somebody who has been a big fan, but hopefully able to give you a really good comparison on what this product is. So if we talk about prior Zowie mice, I'm going to go ahead and grab that. If you're a fan of Zowie, notice how the shape is a little bit more different, and the weight is definitely there, but it's not a bad thing. If you don't like the light mouse, then you can go with the G Pro. If you want to find a balance between the two, and you don't think, and it just feels a little extreme going to the Superlight 2, then there you go. But I think the sensor, the battery life, and I gave Zowie this feedback. I don't think they should sell the mice feet with the pure Teflon as they do like this. It just works. I stopped changing the mice feet because I did give feedback. The old G Pros were horrible, okay? They gave you like the black mice feet, and they were really, really bad. And they just didn't really work. But now, I don't do that anymore. I like the standard mice feet. I think that they're fantastic, and they work very, very well. So I don't have much to say about this. Now, maybe here's the con. Why in the world would you upgrade from the Superlight to the Superlight 2? And the only response I could give is that if you're looking to inch out every single bit of performance, and 2K polling rate makes that big of a difference for you, and you've used a higher polling rate mouse, and if you've never used them before, try to just multiply that thought process of feeling alive and floatiness feeling with a sensor that is flexible. All right. Now, I'm not the big fan of software, so I'm going to overlay the software here. Here's some tips, because I'm not the biggest fan of any software. I always like to plug and play, which is why I gave Zowie the shout out of like, hey, it was very simple, very easy. Is that you do have the flexibility to do almost whatever DPI you want on this mouse, which is really, really great. You can set profiles. Now, just make sure that you're setting the profile, because when you launch a new game, that profile does segue with a new set of settings. You can go into the settings and double check to make sure it's 2000 polling rate. I had the software up the whole entire time, concerned that it would like revert or something like that, because at one point it was doing that, and then like a patch came out and it seemed like it was fine. So just set your settings. You can put them on your memory and never have to launch the software again. That's what I've always done with Logitech, but there's a lot of features there. I'm not a software guy. I gave you guys that disclaimer. I just want a mouse that just does what it does. Don't run while I'm gaming. I did leave it up this whole time through, and Logitech software seemed to play pretty nice with Apex Legends. I didn't have any issues with it, so there is that as well. Now, what we'll do is I'll just do some quick recoil control in the range and just kind of give you an overall feel and thoughts on the mouse again, and then we'll pretty much wrap up. What I'm going to segue to right before we showcase a bit of this test range is a clip that I got utilizing the mouse live on stream. I'll segue to that clip. And during that stream, if you're curious of the overall performance, I wasn't allowed to say I was utilizing this mouse, but I did use it during that full 4 hours of stream, and I'll have that link down in the description down below. Who's the other team? How many people do I gotta kill? Oh my gosh. Dude, how many people were there? I heard another squad, but my gosh. Okay. Now, the biggest thing if you are a movement player in Apex Legends, because the scroll feels a little bit more fluid, what I really liked is how it felt overall moving the scroll wheel, because it doesn't have as much of that resistance. As well as, let's say, the recoil control, especially when being a bit more precise, does feel a little bit nicer. It's not perfect, but it does definitely feel a bit nicer, because remember, this mouse is all about that precision feel and that alive feeling, especially when you're trying to control recoil. I know the mouse is very large on screen, but I just kind of want to showcase even just how little that I'm moving my hand just to control that recoil, and you can see it right there, but I just kind of want to focus. I had to make it really large, and I'm at the edge because of where my camera is placed, but I just really, really wanted you to see just how that looked. Now, that's my overall thoughts. Hopefully this helps you make an informed decision on the Superlight 2. I really enjoyed this mouse. You know, these days there's a lot of great mice with a lot of great features, and everything just kind of keeps one-upping everything that we're doing. So again, if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Thank you, everybody. See you guys soon.